This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stuckats on the ticket. Every week during the baseball season, ESPN's premier baseball insider joins Dan and Stuckats to drop some hardball knowledge and take your calls.
2 plus 2, I'm going to undress you. 3 and 3, you're going to undress me. 4 and 4, we're going to freak some more.
Here is Dan Le Batard, Stuckats, and Tim Kurkjian on ESPN Radio.
Baseball is almost back. That means Tim Kurkjian is back, and I'll take your phone call, 786-456-4837. That's 786-456-4837. All right, Tim, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go from calls to updating our NCAA tournament because I know you love the looks like game, and so I'm going to update a tournament game and then take a call and then back to the tournament, okay? So let's start with the tournament real quick. Yesterday, the 1 seed out west, Gonzaga, advanced, and that means this advances in our tournament.
Tim Kurkjian looks like the jockey of a horse named Can of Corn, owned by Scott Van Pelt.
We're glad that advanced, Timmy, but that means the 16 seed, Fairleigh Dickinson, represented by this, is out.
Tony Reale looks like the guy in a 1986 Brooklyn pool hall who immediately pulls out his notepad and pencil to take bets when a fight is beginning to break out.
All right, Timmy. Midwest Conference, Kentucky, the 2 seed. They advance. That means this advances in our tournament.
Jeff Fisher looks like when he's asked, "What are you doing?" He says, "Saving the world," as he throws an empty beer can in the recycling bin.
I love how much he loves these. But that means that the 15 seed in the Midwest, they've been eliminated. I have no idea who the school was.
Marvin Lewis looks like the Chuck E. Cheese manager apologizing profusely for why his pizzas are taking so long.
Mike, what was that school?
It's labeled as ACU. Make me know that acronym.
Abilene Christian University, I think.
All right, there you go.
I think it's something like that.
Someone bet some games.
All right, let's go. All right, the 2 seed in the East, Michigan State, they advance. Close game. Tom Izzo's a maniac, but that means this advances in our tournament.
Andy Reid looks like the mall cop who gets caught on the downward escalator chasing teens who jump to the other escalators going up.
It really does. That means
Andy Reid is so good. He's the answer to so many of these things.
What's your favorite Andy Reid? Is it the donut one?
I think it's the donut one. And I told you guys when I went to the White House to do the Cubs thing, one of the Secret Service security guys there, he didn't even say hello. He just looked at me and said, "Andy Reid looks like," and looked at his dad, like, fill in blank. There's so many good ones. It was at the White House.
Great.
Secret Service, so great. But that means, Timmy, that the 15 seed in the East, Bradley, that means this has been eliminated.
Tony Dungy looks like the villain from a Christmas claymation movie.
That's a heck of a run, Bradley. The 3 seed out East, very close game. LSU, they advance. That means, Timmy, this advances in our tournament.
Mike Greenberg looks like the jogger who lets the cyclist that is riding on the sidewalk know it's a sidewalk, not a side bike.
I want that to go far. I think that is a great one. Unfortunately, though, the 14 seed, Yale, represented by this, is out.
Sal Palantonio looks like the distant relative at a wedding who excitedly approaches you and says, "Oh my God, I used to change this guy's diapers."
Let's go to Michigan, the 2 seed out west, Timmy. This advanced yesterday in our tournament.
Jim Harbaugh looks like the guy who scoffs at you for ordering your steak medium well, then proceeds to tell the waiter, "Just run a flashlight over mine."
But that means the 15 seed out west, Montana, this was eliminated.
Mike Leach looks like one of the Angry Birds.
Let's update our tournament here with Tim Kurkjian. Some of the teams that are out because Gonzaga won, so FSU is out. That means this is gone from our Looks Like tournament.
Jackie McMullen looks like the substitute teacher that says, "I'll wait," and then doesn't talk until the class quiets down.
Tough one, man.
Tennessee is gone in overtime against Purdue. Tennessee represented by
Sam Darnold looks like a Lego policeman.
That's very true. Michigan is gone. This game was awful. Michigan is gone. That means this is gone.
Jim Harbaugh looks like the guy who scoffs at you for ordering your steak medium well, then proceeds to tell the waiter, just run a flashlight over mine.
And Oregon is gone, defeated by Virginia. Virginia's still getting in everyone's way. Here is Oregon, gone from the tournament.
Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson looks like what LeVar Ball thinks LeVar Ball looks like.
It's Oregon, by the way. Fine.
Thank you, Stugatz. Mike, we also have to update the NIT quarterfinal matchups here. So Indiana is is out and is a 1 seed that is out. Indiana is represented by
Ed Orgeron, Doug Peterson, Houston Nutt, and Mike Leach look like the dogs playing poker painting.
Creighton is gone from the NIT. Creighton represented by
Mike Greenberg looks like the host of a dinner party who, when serving the wine, announces, "This is a Chateau Latour 1899, and then says while chuckling, "That's the year, not the price, bud," while looking directly at you.
Number 4, Colorado's gone from the NIT. That means this is gone.
Rob Pelinka looks like a wax sculpture of Rob Lowe.
And this is a bummer. NC State is gone from the NIT. That means this is gone.
Quinn Snyder looks like tax evasion.
He does. There's no disputing that. Does Pete Carroll look like the guy who sees his neighbor washing their car and jokingly says, "Can you do mine next?" Does Dan Patrick look like your high school history teacher who you run into at the weed dispensary? Does Bill Walton look like the ice cream man? That's a good one. It really is. Does Jason Garrett look like the powerless sheriff in the Old West answering to the local real estate tycoon Jerry Jones, who feels threatened by the new big shooting outsider Sean McVay?
Did you see Sam Darnold this morning?
Yeah, he's on First Take, Sam, and he looks like a Lego fireman, right? You noticed it?
Saw it, Tim,
yeah, Tim, you saw that he looked like he's made of Legos, right? You saw it now.
I watched the whole segment. I laughed all the way through it because he looks like he's a Lego.
Does Brad Stevens look like the WWE referee who tries to disqualify someone but gets drop kicked and knocked out while talking to the scoring table? He does, doesn't it? And this one's going to be very hard for Tim. Does Buster Olney? I told you, it's going to be very hard for him. Does Buster Olney look like the cowering hostage in a bank robbery that when the gunman yells, "Who's the manager?" points to the man squatting next to him?
It's really tearing him up.
That's not Buster. Buster, he grew up on a farm.
Does he look like it? Does he look like
No,
it? It's
he
not that he
doesn't.
is.
He did grow up on a farm. Isn't he always betting the farm in the off season?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he says, "I'll bet the family farm." He's being quite literal there.
Does Mina Kimes look like a senator's young assistant, hurriedly walking behind, carrying a stack of documents and constantly whispering into the senator's ear, "Your next meeting, 5 minutes"? Are you ready, Kirkshin? Does Bruce Pearl look like he eats a baked potato like a taco? Like, he totally looks like that. Put it on the poll, Guillermo, at Lebitard Show. Does Bruce Pearl look like he eats a baked potato like a taco? Okay. So
a lot
anyway.
of butter and sour cream in that bite, right?
Yes.
Oh, it's a fully loaded baked potato. Whole bunch of bacon.
All right. We'll get to the Looks Like game with Tim Kirkshin in a second. But if you want to ask him your baseball questions, your etiquette questions, it is. It's unbelievable.
It stays with you, doesn't it, Timmy?
It does.
I still can't get over the Bill Walton. Looks like the ice cream man.
Bill Walton looks like the ice cream man from last week.
Yeah.
Yeah, but does Mike Breen not look like the soda jerk from the 1950s? Does Matt Patricia look like he eats cereal out of a mixing bowl? Does Randy Johnson look like he has a pool cue case made out of snakeskin? Does Baker Mayfield look like the guy driving the motorcycle that Josh Rosen's girlfriend gets on the back of after she calls Josh a jerk? Does Mike Greenberg look like the guy who holds his nose when jumping into the pool? Does Brett Brown look like a Key West fishing guide?
Oh, wow.
That's a good one, right?
That is dead on.
Does Kenny Mayne look like he has a structured settlement, but he needs cash now?
You got Izzy with that one.
Does Andrew Luck look like he chews soup? Does Bill O'Brien look like the dad who yells execute between pitches every time his 3-year-old son comes up to bat in a T-ball game? Does Klay Thompson look like the nightclub busboy who comes over to wipe down the floor with a towel when someone spills their drink? Does Stan Van Gundy look like the guy when eating a hot dog has the hot dog slip out of the back of the bun when trying to take the first bite?
Dad, I ordered a pizza. The other night. It was on the box. It's perfect. It's the best one ever.
Does Sam Darnold look like the 14-year-old who was disqualified for being too intense at a regional karate tournament? Does Stan Van Gundy look like the plumber under your sink whose wrench is always just out of reach? Does Terry Stotts look like the 90s sitcom dad who gets his hand slapped for trying to sneak a taste of the brownie batter? Does Doug Peterson look like the only guest who swims in the local motel's roadside pool? Does Barry Melrose look like the guy who pulls out a handkerchief to wipe the blood off his knuckles after beating down one of his incompetent henchmen?
Those really long coats. It's perfect.
Does Quinn Snyder look like the protagonist of a sci-fi film about a mad scientist who thinks he's creating a new life form to help advance the human race, only to later realize horrible things happen when you attempt to play God? Does Brett Brown look like a guy selling his backyard tiki bar on Craigslist? Does Doris Burke look like the divorce court judge who peers at you over her glasses with disdain as your soon-to-be ex-wife describes what you do for a living? Does Hubie Brown look like the butler who arrives 1 minute after the front door mysteriously opens on a haunted mansion?
Oh, poor Hubie.
What do you mean, poor Hubie? He looks like that. Not as much as Chris Kaman looks like that, but he looks like that.
He's so great. No ghosts in the painted area. Oh, my God.
Does Paul Feinbaum look like the evil scientist discovered amid the ruins of his laboratory after the monster he created escapes from its cell? Does Jared Goff look like he's nervously awaiting the results of his girlfriend's pregnancy test? Does Stan Van Gundy look like the guy at the bar who keeps putting his hands in the free peanut bowl and when he realizes he's about to finish, picks up the basket, waves it in the air, side to side, so the bartender can give him a refill?
And then he goes and orders a pizza.
That's right.
Stugatz wants a new boat. Time for some more ads.
Orders a pizza, and then it comes with his face on the box.
That Doug Peterson one is a one seed. That's one of the funniest ones I've ever heard.
I haven't heard Stugatz laugh legitimately at one like that. Maybe
good.
ever.
Doug Peterson looks like the only guest who swims in the local motel's roadside pool.
It's perfect, man.
I had two Petersons here. The other one looks like the local deep-sea fishing guide who truly believes in the treasure map he's showing you. Peterson does look like the sea. He does.
Perfect.
He smells like salt water for sure, and whiskey. Does Matt Patricia look like the dad at the restaurant who lies that it's his 7-year-old's birthday so he can get a free bowl of ice cream? Does Boomer Esiason look like the concept art for The Simpsons? That's a 1 seed, man. That is a 1 seed.
That's great.
Does Brett Brown look like your mom's new quote-unquote friend who's taking her on a cruise? Does Brett Brown always look like he's just been laid off? Does Bryce Harper look like he spits his gum in a urinal? Does Mel Kiper look like the old, wise, bald eagle in an animated movie that makes sure... I'm not done yet, Tim.
You had me at Mel Kiper.
Wait a minute. I'm not done. You got to let me finish him. Does Mel Kiper look like the old, wise, bald eagle in an animated movie who makes sure the young eagles are all being properly majestic and proud eagles? Does Trey Wingo look like the guy who pushes everyone out of his way to save himself only to turn the corner and get crushed by the foot of the giant monster everyone else was running from? Does Lou Piniella look like he's never used a cell phone?
Sweet Lou.
Does Nikolai Jokic look like a loaf of bread? Does Russell Wilson look like a cyclist who uses an overly aggressive 90-degree arm motion to let you know he will be turning right at this stop sign? Does David Gettleman look like he points to the GPS on your phone and says, turn that gizmo off, I know a shortcut, only to lead you in the wrong direction? Does Ed Malloy look like the youth minister who pauses mid-scripture to remind the mischievous Steph Curry that even though he may not be watching, Jesus always is? Does Mike Budenholzer look like he lost his job 3 months ago but keeps pretending to go to work every morning because he's too ashamed to face his family? Or does he look like the guy running and weaving through people at the airport, desperately trying to make his connecting flight? Does Nick Nurse look like your wife's friend's husband who you're forced to let into your fantasy football league because she wants him to make some new friends? Does Jackie McMullen look like the elementary school librarian who, while reading the kindergartners a story, licks the tip of her pointer finger before turning each page? Does Brett Brown look like he walks into happy hour at TGI Fridays and before sitting down shouts, I'll have the usual, Alice? Does Dave Gettleman look like he owns 2 spoiled lap dogs named Sausage and Peppers? Or does Gettleman look like he refers to the celery in his Bloody Mary as his salad for the day? There's some good ones on here, man. Does Mike Vrabel look like the head coach of a Little League World Series team? Does Adam Gase look like the flustered mob doctor who constantly reminds his clients that they didn't teach bullet wounds in vet school? Does Dave Gettleman look like off-track betting? Does Dallas Braden look like the main presenter at a timeshare seminar? Does Draymond Green look like the biology student looking up from a microscope and smiling in a university brochure? He does. That is a good one. Does Nick Nurse look like the computer whiz hired by a robbery gang, terrified he's going to let them down when the pressure's on to crack the code?
We need more Nick Nurses.
Does Rick Renteria look like the grandfather who unknowingly blinds every other customer in the restaurant with his phone's flashlight so he could see the dinner menu?
So annoying.
Does Brett Brown look like the captain of a glass-bottom boat tour you found on Groupon? Does Hunter Pence look like the owner of an essential oils and crystals shop in Portland? Does Andrew Luck look like he gets a lot of brain freezes eating ice cream?
He's in the Civil War cabinet.
Yeah, that's right. Does Seth Curry look like when he's walking towards you, he's offering you a high five, but then as you raise your hand, he slaps you in the crotch and walks away laughing?
Does and then makes a 3 drifting to his left.
That's right. That's right. Tim, we'll talk to you next week. Does Bruce Bochy look like a North Georgia canoe rental operator who, when asked if there's a size limit on trout, snarls back, "What are you, the damn game warden, son?" Rob Pelinka, does he look like the guy at the resort pool who tells you to bring another round of drinks even though you're not the waiter? Or does Rob Pelinka look like the real estate agent who says the recent murder-suicide you read about really only adds to the house's historical value? Does Matt Patricia look like the guy at the restaurant who orders the turf and turf? Does Jake Arrieta look like the guy who believes that if a dog weighs under 50 pounds, it's a cat and cats are useless?
Really?
Too soon.
A dog one. I mean, enough.
Does Frank Reich look like the guy riding a tandem bicycle with his significant other in an erectile dysfunction commercial? Does Pat Shermer look like the father in a movie who is reading his newspaper in the living room as his children try to sneak their new alien friend right past him? Does Andy Ruiz look like a Comcast cable technician? Does Steve Kerr look like the guy who wins your local charity 5K race every single year? Does Jackie McMullen look like the lady who accidentally spills a glass of red wine on the carpet in the commercial for a deep cleaning vacuum? Does Mike Leach look like he's not surprised to be waking up naked inside of a crop circle again? Does George Hill look like the first victim of a zombie apocalypse? That's a good one. Does Jared Goff look like the guy who receives a corporate email regarding changes to the drug testing policy and accidentally reply alls with "What exactly will you be testing for?" All right, we got a lot of Nick Nurses here. Are you ready? Does Nick Nurse look like a mob boss accountant? Or does he look like the guy at the wine tasting who says he wouldn't serve this Chardonnay to his dog and then spikes his tiny cup into the trash in disgust? Or does he look like the guy on a competitive cooking show who gets ripped by the judges for overcooking a risotto? Or does he look like the guy in a car commercial sitting in the window of a downtown cafe who spills his coffee on his shirt as he watches the latest luxury sedan smoothly glide by? Does Ned Yost look like the dad on Family Feud who gives the sexually charged answer that has the audience in laughter and leaves his wife and children embarrassed? Does Sam Bradford look like the contestant on College Wheel of Fortune who yells out a letter and then realizes it had previously been selected? Does Rex Ryan look like a guy who comes out of the bathroom and exclaims, "This ride is closed"? Does Pete Carroll look like he keeps hugging long after the other person has let go? Does Nick Nurse look like the hip high school vice principal who's embarrassed and mortified when you and your friends see him bowling alone on a Saturday night? Does Quinn Snyder look like the guy both selling the white powdery substance and the guy buying the white powdery substance? Does Herm Edwards look like the supermarket manager who says there's a right way and a wrong way to stack those cans on his shelves, and guess which one you did? Does Jeff Fisher look like Happy Hour at Applebee's? Does Jackie McMullen look like your piano teacher who grows impatient with you for clearly not practicing what she asked you to? Does Danny Ainge look like a 6 a.m. tea time? Does Terry Francona look like an elderly cartoon turtle who retreats into his shell every time he hears a loud noise? Does Will Kane look like the guy who bought his wife a treadmill for Christmas? Does Terry Bradshaw look like the middle school janitor who air guitars with his mop? Does Matt Patricia look like he frequently wears worn-out fingerless gloves and lives inside of the boxcar of a train?
He's a pirate too, right?
He is also someone who looks like a pirate. That's correct. Does Joe West look like a growth on your grandmother's big toe? That's not very nice. Does Rob Palenka look like the guy who cuts in front of your family at the airport gate to ask if there's a separate lounge for diamond status members? Does Nick Nurse look like the loan officer who says to the person on the phone, the bank has done all it can, we will have to take your parents' farm, while doing a Tiger Woods fist pump to the rest of his coworkers? Does Sean Livingston look like a limo driver who tells you that driving the limo isn't his main job? He says he has a lot of side hustles, i.e. Uber, working in a meat processing plant until he gets his big break as a film director. Does Antonio Brown look like a time traveler stuck in 2019 who needs more plutonium to get back to the year 2084? Does Charlie Blackman look like the moonshiner whose still house is burned down when he runs afoul of the Dixie Mafia? Does Adam Silver look like the guest bassonist in the symphony that bows before the crowd just before he sits down to play Tchaikovsky's Fourth? Does Greg Williams... What's that? I'm sorry.
Is he a bowling pin also?
Yes, Adam Silver's a lot of things. He's a bowling pin. He's a middle finger. He's a toe. He's an evil scientist of some sort. You can also, I think, unzip him to reveal an alien. Does Greg Williams look like he refers to the punching bag in his basement as his dojo? Does Colin Cowherd look like the husband playing tennis with his wife in slow motion in a Cialis commercial? Does Mike McCarthy look like the guy grimacing while getting out of bed in a heartburn medication commercial? Does Adam Silver look like the upside down exclamation point at the beginning of an emphatic Spanish phrase?
Great one.
Does Steven Adams look like Poseidon's less successful brother, Joe Sidon, god of canals and inland waterways? Does Bill Plaschke look like the over-the-top local car dealer reminding you that this Labor Day weekend he will be plashing prices on all 2018 models?
That is tremendous. Flashing.
You can't use friends of mine. It's too difficult.
Joe Sidon. I love the less successful brother. Does Jeff Fisher look like the guy who tells the cops she got away from me after explaining how his boat ended up in the woods? Does Tim Kirkshin look like the white-gloved elevator attendant at a 5-star London hotel? Does Andrew Luck at his present age look like he still uses the slide at the local playground? Does Mark Davis look like the old woman in an episode of Cops who ends up getting tased because she simply refuses to put out her cigarette? Does Jeff Passan, this is a good one, look like the maitre d' at a fancy restaurant? He totally does. He does every time. He does. That's amazing. Does Greg McElroy look like he has sex with his socks on? Does Jim Harbaugh look like he makes the family sing Happy Birthday to America on the 4th of July before anyone can begin eating? Does Kim Kowlishaw look like Josh Brolin if instead of becoming a movie star, he became an appliance salesman? Does Greg Williams look like self-taught karate? Does Freddie Kitchens look like the manager of CC's Pizza? Does Dabo Swinney look like a friendly mouse who helps Cinderella make a dress before the dance? Does Andrew Luck look like the guy standing silently at the whack-a-mole game after it has ended, waiting for one more mole to pop up? Yes! Just save that one. Does Field Yates look like the guy who really wants to get his college a cappella group back together? Does Jock Peterson look like he used to stuff Christian Yelich into his locker in high school? Does Scott Van Pelt look like the guy who's sorry he can't help you with directions because he just moved here himself? Does David Griffin look like the high school music teacher who has developed a cult-like YouTube following for his weekly jazz flute tutorials that he likes to call Griff's Riffs? Does Vic Bleeping Fangio look like the Hawaiian tourist who adamantly refuses to be brought on stage during the Luau's big group dance number? Does Stephen A. Smith look like a guy who hums Lean on Me while taking the elevator? Does Les Miles look like he orders agua instead of water at a Mexican restaurant, then looks around the table with a really self-satisfied grin? Does Tom Coughlin look like he's only at the party because his wife dragged him along? Does Mike Sosha look like your coworker who gets caught eating the birthday cake with his hands 20 minutes before the party starts? Does Vic Bleeping Fangio look like he swallows his pills without water? Does Pete Carroll look like the guy cruising down the highway in a convertible with his arm extended behind a passenger seat that has no passenger? Does Adam Silver look like the lone French fry that gets mixed up in your order of onion rings? Tim, does Reese Davis look like a Disney prince? Does Dallas Braden look like a musician in the Muppets band? Does David Blatt look like he's looking at his reflection in a spoon? Do Steve Kerr and Rob Pelinka look like they still hold the wins record as doubles partners on their high school tennis team? Does Mitch Trubisky look like the guy who would make eye contact with you while eating a banana? Does Dak Prescott look like the cop sent to your school to warn you on the dangers of drug use? Does SportsCenter's John Anderson look like a NASA engineer on the Apollo 13 mission who looks up from his monitor, wipes sweat from his brow, and says, "Chief, they don't have enough fuel"? Does Adam Silver look like the wooden spoon that comes with an Italian icy?
Last week it was a French fry. Oh my God, it's so bad.
Save that one.
Does Dave Gettleman look like his chips got stuck in the vending machine? Does Stephen Ross look like a ventriloquist dummy? Does David Griffin look like the third Mythbuster brother? Does Steph Curry look like the special guest star who would sweep in and take Laura Winslow and break Steve Urkel's heart all over again? Does Vic Bleeping Fangio look like the grumpy movie studio security guard who clumsily chases the Muppets through a variety of wacky movie sets after they sneak past his security gate? Does Freddie Kitchens look like the guy who takes a bite out of a cookie, realizes it's actually a dog biscuit, then shrugs and takes another bite? Does Mookie Betts look like an overly confident restaurant server who doesn't write down your order only to come back 5 minutes later and say, "Hey, boss, remind me again how you wanted your steak cooked"? Does John Gruden look like a toddler whose mom is holding out for his first haircut?
Save that one. Great one.
The last one. All right, I got one at the end I'm going to give you. Now I feel scared because I'm overselling it, and I wanted to reduce expectations. Adam Silver and Scott Van Pelt look like a 7-10 split in bowling.
Oversold it.
How dare you! Does Bud Selig look like the villain in a claymation movie? Does Phil Mickelson look like the uncle at your wedding who says he just needed some air as he returns to his table with a visible vomit stain down the front of his tuxedo?
Lefty.
Does Will Kane look like the coworker who thinks he's better than you because he brushes his teeth in the office bathroom? Does Julie Foudy look like the mom of your friend Brad? Does Luke Kuechly look like the bust of a Roman senator? Does Carson Wentz always look like he just drew a penis somewhere that he shouldn't have?
What's there?
Does Raiders owner Mark Davis look like the talking big toe in a commercial for toenail fungus? Does Adam Silver look like Captain Cavity, the villain from a dental hygiene PSA aimed at children whose evil plans are always foiled by a strict regimen of thorough brushing and flossing? Does Brett Gardner look like the state trooper assigned to protecting a college football coach during a game? That's a really good one. It really is good.
That perfect hat on his head. Oh, God. It's bald head. It's perfect.
Does Paul Feinbaum look like the banker who takes inordinate pleasure in telling you that your loan has been denied? Does Adam Silver look like the Crayola box's white crayon? Does Trevor Lawrence, the Clemson quarterback, look like he lists babes as an interest on his Facebook profile? Does Matt Berry, the SportsCenter anchor, not Matthew Berry, does Matt Berry, the SportsCenter anchor, look like the guy who has all the unnecessary cycling gear when biking 2 miles?
Save that one.
Does Mike Leach look like an unkempt wizard? Like a wizard who's hit hard times? A wizard, a wino wizard on the down and out. Does Romeo Crennel look like the wise old English bulldog in a Disney animated pet movie? Does Freddie Kitchens look like a small town sheriff at a press conference? Does John Bucci-Gross look like he would upgrade his ticket to get the VIP experience at a John Mayer concert? Does Mac Brown look like the head elder elf at Santa's workshop? Does Sage Steele look like the persistent flight attendant who will not budge until you switch your smartphone to airplane mode? Does Matt Nagy look like the third runner-up on Last Comic Standing who's coming to your local comedy club next Thursday night? Does Arthur Blank look like the famous prized art thief who gets persuaded by his old crew to do one last heist?
Yeah, that is art thief.
Does Gardner Minshew sound like the 14 seed that's about to upset Georgetown in the first round of the NCAA tournament?
Save that.
Or does Gardner Minshew look like the local tennis pro who's actively dating 3 wealthy women over the age of 75?
Oh, and God, I have a bulldog, too. Oh, my God.
Does Adam Silver look like the friendly plastic spoon in a children's book who teaches children about the importance of recycling? Does Gardner Minshew look like an Iowa State trooper who's just been placed on administrative leave because he won't stop shooting his weapon at traffic signs? Does Doug Peterson look like he has a martini glass embroidered on his golf bag? Does Jay Glazer look like the ringmaster of a traveling three-ring circus that is 2 weeks away from bankruptcy? Does Trey Wingo look like the doctor who comes in with your test results and tells you that he's got bad news? He missed his tea time. Does Andy Reid look like the small-town sheriff who falls asleep while watching the prisoners, wakes up briefly to yell out, "Who's there?" to no one in particular, and immediately falls back asleep while the prisoners continue to carefully reach for the jail cell keys dangling from his belt? Does Urban Meyer look like the guy who always pushes the door close button in an elevator? Does Adam Silver look like the next evolution of the light bulb? Do you think that Phil Mickelson looks like the guy who uses too much body English when playing cornhole? Does Adam Silver look like the smug paper straw in a cartoon based around grocery store items?
Poor Adam Silver. He's on every show now.
Does he look like the lead professor for the university's solar-powered car design team? Does he look like the animatronic skeleton helplessly sitting on your neighbor's porch, failing to enforce the sign telling trick-or-treaters to please take just one piece of candy?
And a what?
Does he look like a teed-up golf ball?
He's the commissioner of the NBA.
Does Andy Reid look like he awards your pet pig a blue ribbon at the county fair? Does Mike Gundy look like his band's gig at Tiffany and Billy Ray's wedding ran a little late last night? Does Freddie Kitchens look like the cook who gets yelled at by John Taffer for blowing his nose in the same towel he uses to wipe the cutting board?
Drawing for the knife.
I got a lot of Freddie Kitchens here I'm going to get to. Does Freddie Kitchens look like a forklift driver at a Budweiser warehouse? Does Freddie Kitchens look like he just woke up from a wild night and can't find his debit card? Does Freddie Kitchens look like the first contestant eliminated on Chopped Brisket Showdown because he cut himself and forgot an ingredient from the basket? Does Adam Silver look like an Oscar statue before the bronzing?
Save that one.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stuckats on the ticket.